Hello, I apologize for my absence over the past couple of weeks. I have been very sick. It was not a fun time. However, I feel a lot better now. I can finally start making videos once again. I appreciate your patience. We were all very excited for what this chapter of Chainsaw Man would actually produce. Getting left on a cliffhanger of Nayuta is a pretty big deal because we haven't seen her, we don't know the complexities of her, we don't really know what she embodies. All we know is that she's the next version of the Control Devil. And with this new ramp up and interest to the Horsemen of the Apocalypse, now having War and Fami, going back to Nayuta and seeing how she's growing up, how she's evolving thanks to Denji, it's going to be very interesting. Does she naturally fall down the path of Makima's personality, or is Denji able to raise her to be a little bit different? That's where my curiosity lied. And when we found out we'd be going on another date, I was excited to see how it would turn out. And pretty much went exactly how I figured it would, with some surprises here and there, of course. And I'm worried. I'm scared. I fear for Chainsaw Man Part 2 because Nayuta does not seem like the individual that maybe I originally thought she would be. Deep down, I think I hoped that Denji could raise her to be a specific way, to give her the life that she always wanted. But when you're dealing with a horseman, when you're dealing with such a powerful presence, how much work do you have to put in? How much do you have to do to change how they perceive the world? As you can probably tell, I have a lot of questions and none really get answered, but that's okay because we get a nice little date / conversation / bonding / a lot of other things with Denji and Asa. You remember how Denji said that there was rules that shouldn't be broken? Turns out the rules aren't really that crazy. The first one is that you shouldn't open the doors to any of the other apartments. Pretty self-explanatory. And Asa responds to these rules exactly how you would think, with attitude, alongside Denji kind of being stumped with her reaction. Upon entering their apartment, we'd find out the second rule: don't open the fridge. Asa once again claiming it to be common sense, and Denji feeling stumped about it. Before you get onto rule 3, you get to see them together, watching a little movie, taking in Denji's environment in his apartment room, and it's fine. It's not in shambles or utter mess or chaos. It's actually pretty well put together. For someone that has never necessarily lived in an apartment or on his own, I was surprised by this. I thought it would be a little bit more crazy. I thought it would be a little bit more wild, a little bit more out there, but it seems very well put together and maintained, obviously for himself, but as well as Nayuta. And there's a couple of little bits and pieces and trinkets that put Denji and Nayuta together as a functioning family. There's a little fart counter on the wall, and there's also 2 different plants, one with Denji's being healthy and thriving, and Nayuta's withering away. I'm not entirely sure why Fujimoto likes to shy away from who this person is. You never actually see her name. Obviously, we know who it is. Maybe because it's been quite a bit of time since we've seen her from the end of the story. I still find it a little odd, but most likely just to build that tension just a little bit more, even though we know who it already is. Now, I would like to believe that Rule 1 and Rule 2 are gauging, basically mentally prepping Asa for the actual rule that Denji's going to lay down. So the first are kind of non-existent, they're pretty basic, but they're in forms of don'ts. Don't do this, don't do that, in preparation for the third rule, the most important one. I like how Denji prefaces all of this saying that Nayuta is a problem child, but she's out walking the dogs currently and she'll be home soon, and she has an extreme personality. With the third rule being, no matter what, don't make out with me in front of her. And within the timely, typical fashion that is Asa, she sparks up. She gets flustered and confused and defensive and turning into that typical argumentative personality that she likes to bring forward when she feels backed into a corner, whether it be mentally or emotionally. I really enjoy that transition between her personalities, especially because the beginning of the chapter, she's, I guess, very grounded in her response. She's not really showing that much emotion. She's sitting within Denji's room with the blankest expression that you can imagine. And as soon as Denji provides that third rule, she loses it. So of course she starts expressing everything that's on her mind and becoming really defensive. And Denji's just trying to cover his bases, really. He's trying to be careful when it comes to Nayuta. But typically how this goes is that they become intertwined with each other. Every time Asa has this spark up within her personality and she starts to flip the switch and really just express herself in a lot of different ways that isn't really consistent, Denji gets wrapped into it very quickly. So even if he's trying to take this position of, well, I'm just trying to be careful, because of the words that Asa says that come out very powerful, saying that, do you think I like you? This catches Denji off guard and reels him in exponentially. Now he's confused. He's trying to figure out what's going on. The shock on his face when Asa confidently says that there's no way that she would ever like him, and on the contrary, she hates him, is beautiful. It's priceless. He's so stumped by this because he's already figured out in his head that she's already asked for for a date, and then the second date she agreed to, the head pat situation, in his mind he figured that there was a 90% chance that Asa liked him. This is where you get the opposite transition. So if you go from blank expression, transition up into the high personality denial stage that Asa goes through, this one transitions out of it. And I love seeing the change in the facial expression take place. Like, she quickly loses that confidence and becomes quiet and kind of even depressive. Obviously there is meaning within her words, but it's fragile. At least the way she expresses it so defensively makes it seem fragile. It's hard to tell what is true with Asa and what isn't because of the life that she has led up to this point, and not really knowing how to comfortably navigate a relationship, let alone a friendship, let alone a male companion that she could talk to. And she starts to push Denji away. At this point it becomes pretty surreal. Asa seems dead serious. She's no longer having this playful personality. She genuinely thinks Denji will end up dead and that he should just stay away from her. I entirely do not believe the fact that she went on a date because of a distraction. Obviously we know that's not true because there's ulterior motives, but I think she's trying to convince herself that she doesn't like Denji, or at least a part of her doesn't like Denji. But we know the aquarium situation turned out very different, and the more and more their personalities intertwine in so many different ways, and Denji's able to keep up with this flippant nature of Asa's switch, if you will, the more they start to complement each other rather well. I said it within the aquarium situation, but these two bring, I guess, the real sides of them out for one another. Denji's a little bit slow on that upkeep, just for normal sake with how he deals with himself and life, understandable, but with time, it naturally changes. Asa, on the other hand, has only ever been so real, so honest, so aggressive, so sad, depressed, whatever it may be, all of these different ranges of emotions with Denji. In typical Denji fashion, he goes on this mental journey of what he done wrong, on questioning everything that she says, but really missing the point or the purpose of what is actually being said. Denji's thought process goes to whatever he can think of, and it steamrolls off of each other pretty nicely actually. First he thinks about feeding her the starfish, then he thinks about a dog nose, then he thinks about someone calling him a wet dog, which is Makima, how he originally took that as a compliment, but now he thinks maybe he just stinks, and maybe Asa hates him because he stinks. Do you see the mental gymnastics that he goes through, which, mind you, none of this is just a thing. He's questioning whether or not he should sleep with the dogs because he stinks, because Asa might hate him because of that, when in reality it's nowhere near that line of thought whatsoever. I actually think it's a pretty good problem solving method for Denji, which we don't see all too often. Like, this is his brain working, and while it's not necessarily close at all, he's trying. He's genuinely being empathetic and trying to figure out what is wrong or what he has done wrong to Asa. It's a learning step, trying to read the room, trying to be empathetic towards people. And while it is still kind of for his own personal gain, it's a great problem solving method for him mentally and emotionally. So even if he deals with stuff outside of Asa, this is a great way to go about it. Yoru has now switched in, has broken the third and most important rule, and she kisses Denji. Now obviously Yoru tries to turn Denji into a weapon once again with the head pat, and I think this is going to become a pretty cute thing that they constantly do, but then the door swings open and all the dogs come rushing in, and for the first time you see the problematic child. When she's standing outside, she looks like a very young Makima, and I adore the very on-the-nose symbolic gestures to what Makima was, with the dogs and the umbilical cords, with her hair kind of falling in the same position as Makima, her standing outside of an open door just kind of glazed off so you can't see her. It's scary. And for the first time you see her, a young Nayuta, a lot older than we originally seen her as, and while it's only been about a year, it seems like she's aged rather quickly. Now, there is another page that accompanies this because she's kind of manipulating the chains in a sense. Could be entirely wrong, but it looks like she has shot the chain through Yoru's head. I don't know if this is an artistic error or if this genuinely just happened, because there's no real blood or graphic indicator to show it off. It just seamlessly goes through. It would make sense, of course, with what Denji said and how Nayuta acts and the power that she has, of course. What does that actually mean for Yoru and Asa though, if true? I honestly don't know. Does she just get knocked out? Does this heavily injure her, which I highly doubt? Does this make her even more confused with what Nayuta and Denji are? Like, there's so many questions that the final panel provides, and I have no answers for them. Just more curiosity, if anything. I love Nayuta's design though. It looks scary. Even though she is an older child now, she has that infamous Makima braid. braid. I will say I would like to believe that Denji is the one that does her hair. That is my headcanon. And I would say that braids are typically pretty easy to do, and considering how much he was infatuated with Makima, that braid would make a lot of sense to do it that way for her. Also, the hand gesture with the pointing leaves us in a pretty bad position. When we originally were introduced to her, she was only throwing up peace signs and she was pointing up. Now she is pointing down, which, given the context of thief being said, she's passing judgment now, which puts her one step closer in being the control devil and harboring that power in a way that could be very, very destructive. Of course, Denji is trying to mitigate this and to provide her a life that is very comfortable, so I would say that it is working half and half, that all the effort and things that Denji is doing, Nayuta is extremely connected to him. Hence the third rule, don't kiss him, don't make a move on him, for this reason alone, that Nayuta will see it like you are stealing him away from her. I think this is going to be a very interesting development, and while we have to wait 2 more weeks, I couldn't be more excited. I'm curious to see if or how Yoru reacts to another horseman, if that's even possible, but now that I think about it, conveniently she probably won't remember because she couldn't remember Fami. I guess time will tell. With that, however, I would love to hear all of your thoughts on the chapter right now. Thank you.